They said it without even lowering their voices. This thing is dead. 15 years dead. At some point, you stop pretending history can be rewritten. I remember standing there with a cart of cleaning supplies, a rag hanging from my back pocket, pretending to scrub a stain that wasn't really there. The maintenance bay was all steel and echoes the kind of place where sound hangs in the air a little too long. 5 engineers in pressed shirts stood in a half-circle, arms crossed, nodding like it was a funeral they'd already attended before. No one was talking to me. No one even saw me. To them, I was just another background detail. The girl who emptied trash cans, wiped fingerprints off glass, and disappeared when important people started talking. And they were important people. You could hear it in the way they spoke. Calm, certain, educated certainty. The kind that doesn't feel the need to explain itself. The core design was flawed, one of them said, tapping a tablet with a stylus that probably cost more than my week's groceries. Even if we wanted to revive it, we'd be putting people at risk. Someone laughed lightly. Not cruel, worse dismissive. I felt something tighten in my chest, that familiar mix of frustration and restraint. I'd felt it my whole life. The feeling you get when you know something and know no one is going to believe you. They drifted out of the bay, one by one, still talking, already, moving on to their next problem, their next success, their next version of history. The room got quiet. Too quiet. I stopped pretending to clean. I looked up at the engine. It hung there like a giant suspended heart. Steel ribs, darkened lines, scars from time and neglect. To them, it was a failed experiment, a cautionary tale. To me, it was my grandfather. I grew up with this engine before I ever saw it in person. I grew up with notebooks filled with sketches instead of bedtime stories, with whispered arguments at the kitchen table, with my father coming home exhausted and silent, carrying the weight of a man who'd watched brilliance get buried because it didn't come in the right package. They called my grandfather reckless, said he cut corners, said his design was unstable. They never said what he really was. Different. I took a step closer, the soles of my shoes echoing on the concrete. No alarms, no one watching, just me and the machine everyone had given up on. "Everyone thinks you're broken," I murmured, barely realizing I'd spoken out loud. "But they're fixing you like you were never meant to be." That's when I decided I wasn't going to let it end like this. I didn't storm into offices. I didn't confront anyone. I'd learned early that noise doesn't equal power. Silence does if you know how to use it. So I listened. Every day while I cleaned, I listened. I memorized their language, their assumptions, their blind spots. I watched where their hands hesitated, where they rushed, where they followed rules without asking why those rules existed in the first place. And slowly, painfully clearly, I saw it. They were rebuilding the engine the way textbooks said engines should work, not the way this one was designed to work. The timing was wrong, not off by a little wrong in spirit. The fuel delivery had been standardized, stripped of the very quirk that made it revolutionary. They'd smoothed out the irregularities, not realizing those irregularities were the point. I didn't touch it at first. I knew better. Touching meant risk. Cameras, consequences. My dad's job, mine. But knowing and doing are different things. One night after the guard's footsteps faded down the hall, I crossed the line. Literally, stepped under the rope. My hands shook not from fear, but from the weight of what it meant. I traced the housing, the intake, the timing assembly. "There you are," I whispered. "They never listened to you." I took photos, measurements, just enough to confirm what I already knew, and that's when everything blew up. The next morning I was pulled into an office I'd never been invited into before. Glass walls, leather chairs. Authority you could feel in your spine. A freeze frame from a security camera stared back at me from a screen. My hands on the engine, my face focused in a way that didn't match my job title. One of the engineers leaned back and smiled like he already had the verdict. "Care to explain why a cleaner was handling priceless equipment?" "Cleaner, not my name." I swallowed, because the auxiliary line was misrouted. Silence slammed into the room. What he said flatly, "The timing gear is misaligned." I continued, words spilling now that the dam had cracked. "And you rebuilt the injector to standard specs. It needs a pulsed sequence. Continuous flow destabilizes it." Someone laughed. Actually laughed. "That's adorable," the lead engineer said. "Where did you learn that YouTube?" I felt my face burn, but I didn't look away. "From the original design. That's when the director spoke. Calm, curious, dangerous. "What's your connection to the original designer?" I hesitated for half a second, then told the truth. "He was my grandfather." You could feel the temperature drop. They didn't kick me out. Worse, they humored me. Gave me a deadline, a chance. The kind you're given when someone wants to prove publicly that you never belonged in the room. 2 days. I didn't sleep. I dug out notebooks my father had hidden for years. The real ones, not the sanitized versions history remembered. Pages filled with sketches, ratios, ideas that bent rules instead of obeying them. At one point, exhausted and shaking, I pulled out my grandfather's old pocket watch. It hadn't worked in years. The ticking had stopped long ago. As I turned it over in my hands, something clicked literally. The timing, not continuous, pulsed, controlled release, like an escapement. My hands started moving before my brain caught up. By the time I walked back into that building, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. The room was full. Engineers, board members, people who smelled like power and expectation. Cameras I hadn't anticipated. I spoke calmly, simply. I didn't try to sound impressive. I let the ideas do the work. They interrupted me, talked over me, questioned my credibility. Then they showed old footage, the explosion that destroyed my grandfather's career. Flames, chaos, fear. The room turned against me, until I saw it. A shadow at the edge of the frame. A hand making an adjustment that wasn't logged, wasn't authorized. "Can you rewind that?" I asked. They tried to move on. I didn't let them. When the image froze, no one spoke. Someone in the audience, an older technician, stepped forward slowly. "That adjustment was never in the report," he said quietly. "Only someone inside the project would know that." The engineer who'd mocked me went pale. I didn't smile. I didn't accuse. I just asked for access to the engine. They said no, then yes, then tried to stop me halfway through. But it was too late. The engine spoke for itself. It didn't roar. It hummed smooth, steady, alive. And suddenly everyone was talking at once. Credit was argued over. Stories shifted. People remembered things differently than they had yesterday. I stepped back. I didn't need applause. I didn't need revenge. I needed the truth to stand where lies had been comfortable. Later, when it was quiet again, I walked past the engine one last time. The glass reflected my face. Not the girl with the mop, not the ghost they'd ignored, but someone solid, someone seen. I fixed my grandfather's watch that night. It ticks now, perfectly timed. Funny thing is, I didn't change. They just finally stopped looking past me. So here's my question to you. Do you think people ignore the truth because it's hard to see, or because it comes from someone they never expected to hear it from?